This story, found in Chapter 4 of Dark Pages Unbound, Greed and Goblins, Part 2 of 2. Written by Brandon McAleavey. Previously on Greed and Goblins, Part 1 of 2.
When finally we reached the chamber marked on our map, it felt less like a triumph and more like the end of one nightmare, perhaps the beginning of another. What we didn't know then was we made it here with little trouble only because we were allowed to. We should have run, but a second voice, one that felt more tangible, it soothed me. It was soft, gentle, coaxing. This new whisper twisted our fear into gilded hunger. We looted like starving dogs. Ventura entered, untouched by the greed. She pointed back at the entrance of our treasure chamber. You have what you came for. Now we leave. I still lingered, entranced by one single chest. I wouldn't leave it. This was no cursed cave. It was a mouth, and we walked willingly into its throat. We were set to leave before it swallowed us. Dura rushed ahead as a bulwark. As we charged, the goblins pressed us at every turn. The illusion of escape shattered. The path we took to the treasure was never ours. It was one given, and now it was being taken back. The goblins seemed more than mindless raiders or thoughtless thralls. They were a coordinated, malevolent force. Every path out was hemmed in by waiting fangs and blades. It was a bloody gauntlet. Dim, jaundiced eyes menaced from every shadow. Arrows whizzed past. Jagged blades slashed from everywhere. We were cut and sliced. We bled freely. Small cuts, deep wounds, it didn't matter. All in the name of escape. Forward was the only direction that wasn't death. But something in me knew we were being herded. Time unraveled completely. After an eternity of flight, Dura motioned us into a dark hollow, dousing our torches. The glow of her mace vanished beneath her cloak. In darkness, the horde surged past, missing us for now. I heard Dura set down my chest with a grunt. Then she lit a sliver of tinder for a small light, which revealed she had been impaled with arrows. Dozens, barbed, filthy, she led the way. She took those arrows for us. Blood trickled from her mouth, soaking her now filthy cleric's robes. She said nothing, just began pulling them all free. With each wet rip came a silent scream. She whispered her prayers. Light bloomed from her hands. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. But her eyes were dull, and yet still she stood. Then Elgin gasped. In the far corner of the alcove, lit by the faint flicker of tinder, stood a shrine. A crooked, obscene, profane shrine. Spires of bone wired together in impossible angles. Plates of rust hammered with embedded teeth. Entrails dried and twisted into garlands. The rot here was old, layered, 1,000 sacrifices worth. As our eyes settled on it, static filled our ears. The dominating voice closer. Its words were clear. The same chant the goblins had been singing. The melody was maddening, dissonant. We all clawed at our heads. Anything for relief from this droning. At the shrine's base, a sackcloth twitched as it moved, convulsing, rising. Bones cracked and joints popped. A shape beneath the cloth arched upward, jerkily and slow. A goblin, but not. A dried husk of a goblin, desiccated, twisted. Its spine curved backward unnaturally, vertebrae popping as it stood in silent reverence. Its face lifted, lidless eyes white and webbed with crimson veins. Its nose was a collapsed pit. Its mouth a shriveled crater, lips long since eroded, it yawned too wide. A long, deep inhale, which scraped like sand across tombstones. Then it exhaled. An incantation bellowed from its throat, blasphemous and wrong. The sound crawled into our bones, pushed bile up our throats. Dura hefted the chest without a word. We all turned to leave, all but Kurios, who stood transfixed before the shrine and its skeletal priest. The creature wheezed out arcane syllables, the dry chant merging with the lunatic chorus, echoing through the tunnels. Dura grabbed Kurios by the collar and yanked. As they turned, we saw a twisted gaping of their lips, their vacant eyes, and their jaw moving as if reciting maddening prayers. The flesh encircling their mouth continued to expand as it split and ripped from the strain. Facial muscle became exposed. Blood and saliva drooled down their chin, all while their jaw continued the eulogy of reverence to some forgotten god. Until the pop and crack of bone and ligaments as their lower jaw popped out of socket, widening their gaping maw. Scars on their face throbbed red, glowing like embers. Kurios' fingers dug into their own face, peeling at the seams of recently mended scars, pulling away bits of flesh as if peeling off scabs. Blood poured. Still, Kurios chanted. Their face warped in mirthless ecstasy. Then, arms wide, blade raised, smiling with a joyless grin, Kurios offered themselves to something unseen. We ran. Kurios was already lost, claimed by something far older, far crueler than the goblins. Dura's conjured light led us, while behind, Kurios pursued and warbled, our friend's voice echoing the inhuman rites of a godless tongue. We ran into the timeless dark for I don't know how long, until finally the last passage loomed. Hope welled in us until we noticed it was guarded. A small group of goblins waited, blades bared. All of them, mouths agape, tongues lilting like dangling leeches. Behind us, the encroaching horde. Trapped again. The discordant, dominating voice rose above the hissing din once more, marshaling us to return to the dark, while the second voice of greed whispered to us, urging us forward and out. It commanded that we push past the waiting weapons and sharp teeth ahead of us. Dura didn't hesitate. She roared and charged, trampling our small foes underfoot. They cut at her, tearing her legs open. She didn't stop. We followed. Then, a grunt and a clatter. I turned around. Elgin. Kurios had found him, dragged him into the dark, swarmed by giggling goblin disciples. Elgin's warlock magic burst in pulses of blue, frying air and flesh. But there were too many hands, too many teeth. Eliora roared and gave chase. Dura dropped the chest, seized me, and pulled us into the melee. I'm no warrior. My dagger was more decoration than dangerous. But I followed. This was my fault. We were each cut, bruised, bleeding, weakened from fatigue and loss of vital fluids. Through the darkness, the voice of greed called to me, soft, droning, velvet yet vile.
Leave them. Take the treasure.
It clawed through my skull. I faltered, but I didn't retreat. Though I was still too cowardly to help. I froze. I'm no adventurer. Elgin and Kurios wrestled in the mad dark. Elgin's magic flared weakly. Kurios was changed. Half their face was peeled to raw bone. Their jaw hung like a broken door, swinging with every chant. The hymn droned from deep in their throat, not speech but prayer, a love song to something monstrous. Eliora fought like a berserker with the writhing mass of horrid goblin creatures. They clung to her, biting, slashing at exposed flesh. Dura fought beside her, bashing them off with her brutal swings. Eliora surged through the goblin ranks and reached Kurios, grabbing their scalp and pulling. Flesh tore elastic and wet. Their face stretched like a stubborn mask, refusing to be removed. Kyrios laughed wildly, red, frothy drool dripping onto Elgin's face. With a howl, Eliora drew her blade across Kyrios' neck. The flesh tore away as the sword sliced. The head lolled, then snapped free with a final grotesque pop of tendons and a hideous gurgle. The body collapsed atop Elgin. Eliora, bleeding and panting, yet victorious, lifted her brother. He could barely stand. Already fractured bones snapped beneath his weight. His eyes rolled, his lips muttered. His sword slipped from his fingers, his skin was shredded. He was beaten. Thura cleared the way, and once again we all limped to our escape. Foolishly, we believed the cave was done with us. As we all struggled for breath, heavy footfalls pounded behind us. The eldritch, dominating voice laughed from everywhere and shook the cave itself. From the dock, 3 nightmares emerged. Goblins, perhaps, no longer. Hideously huge, monstrous beings. More akin to orcs than goblins. They had become flesh parodies, walking cysts of disease and hate. Swollen horrors, tumors pulsed beneath blistered skin, their meat split and leaking with every breath. Veins the color of dried pitch throbbed like parasites, carrying putrid ichor that burbled from ruptured growths. Their faces were masks of decay, bulging and blind and crusted with gore. One amongst their trio was even more horrifying than the others. The last was a golem of corpses, a patchwork thing, sewn together like a child's abominable doll. There were superfluous, useless limbs, rotting and jammed into its torso, held in place with splintered bones, leaking thick infected discharge at each place of connection. Where the skin had torn, it oozed a gelatinous yellow fluid. The creature was alive, and yet never had been. They roared and barreled at us. We all ran, spurred by terror, not for glory, not for treasure, but for our very lives. Elgin staggered, slowing us, but we couldn't leave him. Behind us, the horde screamed, a frenzy of devotion to the voice of domination that sang inside our minds. It pulsed a wave of 2 choices. Turn back, to join the praise for whatever ancient god slept below us in the darkened depths, or run away in vain, leading only to the inevitable, torturous death. It didn't care which, only that we choose now. We reached the crossroads once more, and the grotesque goblins closed all distance between us. Elgin was simply too slow, and the rest of us were too tired. Elgin cried out. One of the bloated monstrosities had seized him away from Eliora, pustules bursting as it moved. Viscera vomited from its infected wounds, covering the warlock, mouth stretched wide and trembling with ecstasy. Its claws dug deep, raking into Elgin's chest. Blood burbled beneath its fingers. Elgin wept, gasping, while the hideous monstrosity cackled in riotous laughter. Eliora fought to reach him, blades glimmering in the fading glow of Thura's light. She slashed at another of the horrors which stood between her and her twin. It stood an imposing terror, made flesh, tumor-riddled, wet with rot. Flesh parted, but the thing did not care. It moved through her strikes, skin falling away in sheets as she carved, exposing glistening meat beneath. Thura lunged to help her, shouting, "Get Elgin!" To me, she knew the truth. She knew it was too late, and I knew it too, but I ran anyway. This was my penance to pay for my hubris, for my belief that I could be an adventurer. As I ran into the dark, the greedy voice called to me.
Leave them. You've earned your reward. Take it.
After all, it's what I had longed for, what I had earned. I almost gave in. It would have been easy to leave my companions as a diversion as I made my escape, but instead I screamed at myself inside, and I raised my dagger. I slashed the back of the creature holding Elgin. It turned slowly, then stared at me with empty pits where eyes once sat, gaping voids in the monster's face. Though I somehow felt an oppressive gaze upon me, as it grinned sadistically at me. I saw shards of metal and bone jutting from its gums, teeth it had built for itself. Elgin looked at me one last time. He mouthed the word, "Go." Then he sagged, limp, and allowed the beast to carry him into the dock. The goblins wailed in triumph. The voice of domination laughed, a bellowing, satisfied grumble from the deep. Then, boom! An explosion. A burst of gore and fire. I was flung back, blinded, body screaming with fresh pain. Bones splintered. I lay stunned in a puddle of blood and bile. Then, more. Footsteps, heavy and shuffling. I was certain this creature would be upon me in a moment, and I would meet my deserved end. But it was Thura. Thura stood above me, a silhouette of ruin. One arm was gone, her face bloodied and exhausted. She dragged Eliora behind her, unconscious. Through the murk, she dropped her glowing mace at my feet. "Carry it," she said, and collapsed to her knees. I obeyed without question. The mace's light revealed the rest. Thura's side was torn open, her ribcage visible beneath shredded armor and robes. She didn't flinch, just prayed. Warm radiance bloomed from her remaining ruined hand, and stopped again. But her missing arm was gone forever. "Before I can help her, I need rest," she whispered. "Pray, she can be saved." Once more we moved, barely alive, past the treasure chest, my treasure chest, the one I had longed for since my youth, the reason I came here. Thura didn't even look at it, but I did. The voice of greed returned softly.
Take it. You must. It's always been yours, waiting for you.
I convinced myself, this is for their families, this is for them. I grabbed the rope handle, and suddenly, where the chest was too heavy before, it moved across the ground almost too smoothly, as if unseen hands were helping it along. I told myself it was Curios and Elgin, guiding me home, helping to secure the treasure that we deserved. The exit loomed ahead. A pale sliver of moonlight pierced the gloom. Behind us, the drums began to pound and pulse again. A second heartbeat rising, loud and close, raising the furor of the devout calls from and into the depths. I panicked, and I pulled even harder. The voice of greed whispered again,
"Master, safety is within reach."
Oh, I obeyed. I outpaced Thura even, but she was dragging Eliora, twice her size, with one arm. There was no hope. I obeyed the greed, and I ran. I emerged into the moonlight. The air hit me like absolution. I breathed so deep as I thought I had taken the first real breath of my life. I ducked behind a tree, scared, dropping the chest and the mace. But then I looked back, and I saw her, Thura, still inside, now crawling on her knees, still dragging Eliora. Every movement she made was pure exertion. Forgetting I was a coward, I stepped forward to help. But the greed commanded to me,
"Leave. Secure your prize. Save yourself."
The goblin shrieked again. Close now, so close! I hesitated. Then I rejected it, shaking. I ran toward her, ready to give her everything she'd earned and more, so much more. But I was too late. Thura's arm jerked as if caught on something behind her, and her eyes went wide. The patchwork beast, that twisted, orcish goblin of mismatched flesh and too many limbs, had returned. It seized Eliora, chortling like a lunatic. She screamed, weak and half-conscious. I staggered, helpless. I have no magic, no weapons, no skill, nothing to help my companions avoid their miserable fates. But Thura, she had magic and skill. Why didn't her magic flash? Why didn't she fight with her weapon? Then I remembered. Thura's magic was gone. Spent healing us in too many foolish instances prior. She needed rest to replenish her magical well. She said so just moments before. Of course, she used no mace because I had carried it out of the cave and left it behind the tree with a chest that cost everyone their lives. She never stood a chance. Neither did Eliora. Thura pulled with all the might she had remaining, her face contorted in a desperate summoning of strength. Then, a set of 4 arthritic, gnarled, and bone-white fingers crept over her forehead. They slid down across her brow and clawed into her. Her skin split. Blood ran from her eyes. The sewn-together thing let out a deep bark, spewing brown filth from its mouth. Eliora screamed as the summoned goblins pounced on her like a swarm of flesh-eating beetles and carried her away into the darkness. The monster crushed Thura's face, its hand cracking, grinding bone with glee. Thura's mouth opened in a grotesque, calm, and contented smile. Then, a wide yawn. Her eyes rolled back, her skull fractured, a spiderweb of ruin. In one last moment, Thura smiled a twisted smile of empty pleasure, and a moment later, she was gone, dragged into the dark. I waited. I whispered prayers as their screams faded into goblin yips. None of my prayers were answered. I waited as the howls and drums returned to the silent, dark abyss they had echoed from. The cave eventually fell quiet as the sun rose around me, but my companions never did. Their strength saved me. Their deaths bought my survival. My cart was near. A few days' travel would take me and the treasure home. I loaded the chest. I thought of all their families, thought of sending them coin, blood money. But would that undo what I had done? Of course not. But it's what was right. They earned their pay, and I intended to make good. I turned down the road, alone. The treasure wasn't a blessing after all. It truly was a curse, just like the old tales had said. And like always, others paid for my ambition. The fear, exhaustion, and sorrow of this entire event, all of it faded the further I got away from the cave. A gentle calm overtook me. The dominating voice was gone. Instead, the voice of greed crept into my ears again and whispered sweetly,
"All is well now. The burden is behind you. You earned this."
I smiled. I even hummed a strange tune, melodic, yet familiar. I don't recall where I heard it, but the words danced at the edge of my memory. I left that cursed place, content to let legends lie, to let curses stay in darkened tunnels where I hoped this festering bane would lie dormant. I'd be home soon. I was surely exhausted. I yawned, contented in my carriage, unaware of the horrors that awaited me at home.
Thank you for listening to Dark Pages Unbound. Story, Greed and Goblins, Part 2 of 2. Written by Brandon McAleavey. Voices by Brandon McAleavey. Sounds found on freesound.org. Story rights held by the story's author. Please contact Dark Pages Unbound for submissions or suggestions at darkpagesunbound@gmail.com.